Hey, somebody needs to correct the grammar. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer is sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV is just astounding. You go in there and you'll see Hustler turf equipment, the entire line of Echo power tools, not just what they have at the big box stores, but the entire line. And of course, Tucker ATV carries every make and model of Polaris ATVs, from the big side-by-sides to the even bigger Ranger Cruise. And you have to see the showroom. It's taxidermy, antique displays, and an indoor porch with a porch swing, comfortable chairs, television, free coffee. We could move in. But stop in and meet Shannon and Lisa Tucker. They treat customers like family, which is why folks from 14 states have done business with Tucker ATV. Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama, Tucker ATV, the small town business with the national reputation. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And of course, you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. Anytime we get somebody with observations and answers, it doesn't get any better than that. And that's what we have today. We have a friend of mine, probably a friend of yours, probably somebody you listen to and that you watch. We have the host of the Rick Burgess Show. Now, that'll probably give you a clue as to who's here, since he's the host of the Rick Burgess Show. But the Rick Burgess Show this is Sirius, iHeartRadio, 70 stations. It's a big deal. And I love this guy. We have listened to him for years. He is a New York Times bestselling author. I think he's got his 10th or 12th book. Which 10th, 12th? You don't remember either, do you? But this is my book for the moment. This is my favorite book right now. I have already read it. I've listened to it on audio, and I love it. We're going to get into the topic that the title is about. The book's called Men Don't Run in the Rain. Now, if you know Rick Burgess, you know Rick is funny. But if you know Rick really well, you also know Rick's pretty serious. He's a pastor of the Man Church and an author, a broadcaster, and he's my friend. Please welcome Rick Burgess.
Well, here it is. This is the moment I've been waiting on. You know how when you dream of your career and there's certain things you say, when that happens,
this is the end?
I know I have arrived, yeah. Or the end.
Yeah, or the end.
And today I don't know which one this is, but I'm here.
Well,
hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, man, I am so thrilled that you're here and that you came down to do this. You and Sherry came down and we're going to hang out a little bit. So I really appreciate it. And I am excited about everything going on with you right now. Your radio show is just killing it. Man Church. Okay. Explain Man Church real quick.
Okay, so, and you're going to love this because, you know, this is kind of the life you and I live. Nothing's easy, nothing. And if you want everything to kind of go in a different direction, just have you or me get involved.
Sure.
So I was, for the longest, I had been going to church, and every Father's Day, we pretty much hear the same thing. Men are not getting the job done. God's called you to be the spiritual leader of your home. There's a headship that God has given to the man. Men and women are equal, but they're beautifully distinct. And the men in this church, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You're farming out the spiritual leadership to your wife. You know the same speech.
Sure.
And that's important. What's being said is true, and that's a high challenge. And I know you do work with companies and stuff, and one of the things the problem is if all you ever do is give people high challenge, but you never follow with high equipping, they just get frustrated.
Right.
You keep challenging me to do something that you're not training me or equipping me to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, and even talking to the Promise Keepers, I talked to them, what a great movement they had in the 90s. And they said the same thing. We did a lot of high challenge, but we didn't follow up with high equipping because we thought the local church would do that. We didn't think that was our role. Well, if you complain about something long enough, God will eventually say, well, what are you going to do about it? And I thought, no, I just wanted to complain about it. I really didn't want to do anything about it. And so we started putting together a strategy, some friends that I'd met that were in publishing. They've been doing youth ministry and youth curriculum. And we started talking about men's curriculum. And we knew pretty quick that the reason why all the publishers had gotten out of men's curriculum is because nobody wants it. And so we were like, but if we have curriculum in the church, for children, we should. For youth, we should. For co-ed classes, we should. For women, we should. Why is there no curriculum for men? And the reason is because no publisher would ever try it. So we said, well, Rick has a day job, so let's try it. And so what we did is we established a strategy that features high challenge in your events and gatherings. But we also now provide, we have 5 of them. We got number 6 coming out in the fall, and 40-week. Did you know the plural for curriculum is curricula? Did you know this, Mr. Wordsmith?
I did.
You did know that?
I did.
I did not. They did not teach that in Calhoun County, Alabama.
Well, you should have gone past the 7th grade.
That is correct, because there I was still saying curriculums. But anyway, so it's curricula, and we have 5 of those, and you go through 40 weeks. And the way we set up the curriculum is that we don't tell a man he's got to teach a Bible study because you'll lose him. We say you will facilitate a small group, and in you, the facilitator, you get about a 10 to 12-minute video with me setting up the session.
Right.
And then you have a study guide that the men go through it. No homework. Listen, you can give men homework to take home. We're not going to do it.
We're not going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You ever been in a small group Bible study and you realize, is it Thursday again? And you start trying to fill out all your stuff. And,
or read it.
You're right.
Just read it.
Or just look it over. So it's not designed that way. It's designed, you sit down, let's get it done. It's the tone. You can't disciple men by using resources designed for women and children. It just doesn't work. And so here's the funny part. We get it all together. Just like you've done with Wisdom Harbor. We get it all together. We're fired up. Do you know when our first church says we'll start it? March 1, 2020. And the whole world fell into a pandemic.
Yeah.
And then everything that we had planned is just vanishes. No churches are meeting. People aren't coming together. So then we learned, well, if it's digital, you can actually use it on Zoom. And you can do these small groups even with everybody on a laptop or a phone.
Right.
So that actually helped us because we grinded that out for 20. And now as I sit here with you, we have about 2,500 and some change churches using it all over the country. And we are getting great reviews. So we have speakers that we'll send out to you for your high challenge. And then we have curriculum for the small groups. And then we have individual resources in the forms of men's devotionals and this resource you hold right there.
I was so excited. I was excited about this before I read it because you told me the story about the title. And so the title of the book, Men Don't Run in the Rain, and this is a son's reflections on life, faith, and an iconic father. Now, your dad was a famous football coach.
Yes.
And so before we go any further with this, tell about the title. Tell the story about the title.
So, if my dad was a football coach, and my dad was very simple. He wanted to coach football, he wanted to hunt, he wanted to fish, and he wanted to spend time with his wife and children. That's it. He never aspired to be, some big time coach at a big time school. That never even. I remember when after he passed, talking to my mother, and she said, your daddy even never knew how much money we had. I managed all the money. He didn't care. As long as he could fish, as long as he could hunt, and as long as he could spend time with us, that's all he cared about. He even had an opportunity to go to a very big university that I won't name, and he wouldn't do the interview because he was coaching a Division II college team that was in the playoff. And They said, you can't put us off if you want this big job. We need to talk to you now. And he's like, I won't talk to you after the season's over. That's just the way he was. So, but he became a father figure to lots of people.
Lots of people.
He was my father, but he was a father figure to many. And one of them, similar to even your story, but even younger, I had a real close friend who lost his daddy, who was murdered when he was in the 5th grade. Horrible story. But he was always at our house and always around, and he was my best friend. So Dad became kind of a pseudo father for him. So it was him who noticed it first, because I didn't notice it. We were sitting on the steps of the athletic department where Dad was coaching at the local high school, and it was one of these Alabama downpours, that happen every afternoon and in the summer. And Dad's walking up the track from the field back to the field house. And my friend says, "Have you ever noticed your dad doesn't run in the rain?" And this has been my whole life. And I'm like, I'd never really noticed that. But at this time, we're so little, you don't ask him about it.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
You just go, okay, nice observation. And I can still see the water dripping off that cap. And he never changes his gait. He never speeds up. He doesn't slow down. He's just steady. So I get about 13, and now I'm playing on the junior high team. So it's one of these real simple from mama, today after practice, wait on your dad till he finishes with the varsity and just ride home with him. So I'm waiting on Dad, same thing, and I'm standing looking out the window of the athletic department, and I see it's raining. And so Dad comes, he's like, "You ready to go? Let's go." And so I open the door, and I go to dash for his truck. And he just takes his hand, he stops me, he says, "No." He said, "Men don't run in the rain." And I thought, okay. And so I walk with him in the rain. Now, I didn't know at the time, I don't think Dad did either, but did you know that Mythbusters actually did study on this, and you actually get less wet if you'll just walk in the rain versus running in it. I didn't know that, and I don't think Dad did, because that was not Dad's point. As I went along, I realized, because I watched how he lived his life.
Right.
And his life was, if a man is frantic about the rain,
right,
if you're afraid of rain, if you think rain's going to get you, you can't handle the things that you're going to be called to handle, that are far beyond the rain. And I will tell you this, I think my dad's perfect vision of a man and his family is it's raining, and the man's wife is put in the passenger seat completely dry. The man's children are seatbelted in the back seat completely dry, and he sits down to drive the vehicle, grabs the steering wheel, and he's soaking wet. And I think what my dad was saying was much bigger than weather.
Man, I never met your dad, but having read the book and then listened to the Audible, which you are doing.
Yes.
And if you've ever listened to Rick's radio show, and if you haven't, you need to. There's nothing funnier than you telling a story. And this book is full of stories that make a point. But the stories, oh my God. I smiled and chuckled reading the book, but I laughed out loud listening to it.
Yeah. Well, my brother and I stood there. My brother's been, I did the Rick and Bubba show, which people probably know more about now, for 31 years.
Right.
And my brother joined us. We joined Bubba and me probably 16, 17 years ago. And so Greg is on the Rick Burgess show now, which is what I just started, in 2025. And so Dad passed in December of 2023. And Greg and I are standing there at his bedside. And when he passed, I looked at Greg and I chuckled and I said, we just lost a lot of content, because this man, people throw around the true original.
Sure.
They broke the mold when they made that one. And I think we say that about too many people. It's really not true about all that many people. When it comes to Bill Burgess, I've never met a human being that is anything like him. He was quirky. He had his point of view. He had the way he saw things. And it was incredibly unique. And one of the things I thought was interesting about putting him in the book is, like my wife, Sherry, which, you were very gracious in helping her with her book when she came out in 2016. And she's the real writer in the family. It's not me. But I had some good content, is that she said herself, I went to do a speaking thing one weekend, as you might be familiar with. We do some of that. And so I got home, and when a real writer reads your writing, it's very nerve-wracking.
I know.
And so I walked in, and she said, "First of all, let's get this out of the way," and she helped me, learn to write a little better. I can tell stories, but writing stories was harder for me.
Right.
And she said, "You did good. You did good with the book." And I said, "Okay." And she goes, "But here's the next thing." And she knew Dad for 30 years. okay? She said, I learned stuff from your dad. She said, being his daughter-in-law, I didn't know anything before me. And he never talked about his prowess as a coach or any of that. And she said, the things that he taught you, he wasn't going to do that to his daughter-in-laws. They were the most wonderful people on the planet. He was Pop, which is the name from his grandfather. I never saw the man in the book that much. She said, but the man in the book taught me things that I need to apply to my life this weekend. Wow. And she said, so I would say this is a book for anyone, not just men.
Yeah, especially as I was listening to it, that meant I was going through it the second time. I thought, there's very few books that I will tell somebody, you need to buy a couple or three of these because you're going to want to give it to somebody. And, this is not just a book for your dads. Your dads will enjoy it. I think this is a book for young dads, especially. I think it's a great book for teenage and college age girls because you don't want to get it wrong.
Right.
You want to marry the right guy.
Yeah.
And if you want an example of what a man is, I mean, there's so many facets. So, man's like a diamond, and there's many facets. And your dad seemed to have all the facets. Yeah. I mean, it was just, I'm curious though. He was an iconic coach, and he is. I kind of thought he was a coach in that Bear Bryant vein, which means if he was coaching today, they'd probably both be in prison.
Of course,
Yeah. But how did his coaching philosophy? How did that impact? And I'm talking about the coaching philosophy. How did that impact your values and how you parented?
Yeah. Well, he did coach a lot in the vein of those guys. A lot of you, and I'm getting this already because, the book goes out there and then there's that cone of silence.
Right.
And then you start trickling here's what the book meant to me. And I'm starting to get that now.
Right.
And it's, as you and I are doing this podcast, it's been out about a month. And so what I'm getting from men is like, I recognize my old coach in this, and I recognize my daddy, and I recognize my granddaddy, and this is a generation of men we're losing. But Dad's, what I think made Dad unique, even though there were things similar to the type of men you were talking about, no doubt. But he did something a lot of them I didn't think did very well. Is Dad wouldn't just correct you. He would. He wouldn't just discipline you. He would. He would also, with the exact same passion and intensity, he would encourage you. When you got it right, some men, you're in trouble if you get it wrong, and when you get it right, they just say nothing.
It's just quiet, yeah.
He was not that. That's what I'm talking about. I told you could do that. I knew that was in you. That's exactly what I mean. And you always got that from him too. He wasn't just a stoic, scary guy. Don't picture the great Santini kind of stuff, especially with his own children.
Right.
But we didn't have any of that baggage. But he was authoritative, and he was not to be crossed. But he taught you things like, that it's not about you. It doesn't matter what you did last year. Well, that's a great football lesson, but it's also a lesson even in my life right now.
That's a life.
I mean, I'm 60 years old, and so that means I've got a lot of things that were back versus what's ahead. But when I started studying this, and actually my pastor said he'd done the same thing because he took over, pastoring our church after he'd been through some of the biggest churches in the country. And he said, I was looking at retirement, which is not a biblical concept, by the way. Now, you might go to something else,
right.
But you don't just knock it out of gear. And he said, if a man has his cognitive skills and a man has his physical health, the decade of 60 to 70 is the most impactful decade of his life. And I thought, well then I'm not done. I'm doing what I was born to do. I'm doing what I love. And, I also wanted to keep working on myself because my daddy taught me that. I don't sit here and go, we did 31 years of Rick and Bubba, so won't y'all just do the greatest hits? I'm grateful for that.
Right.
But if my dad was standing here today, he would go, great job. What are you doing now?
What are you doing now?
What are you going to do today? And that drives me. I mean, I'm always banging on my craft. I'm talking about at 60 years old, I went and sat and listened to research groups and behind a wall they couldn't see me and let them talk about where they thought I was. And some of it wasn't very good. Some of it was things I needed to improve on.
Right.
But I didn't say, well, I've been in radio for 41 years. Y'all can't teach me anything.
Yeah, what are y'all
because my daddy told me that's not the attitude to have.
Right.
What are you going to do now? It doesn't matter what you did last year. It's okay to remember it, and it's even okay to be proud of it. But what we need to know is, what are you going to do now? And then he taught me a toughness, of how to persevere through difficulty. He taught me the difference between being injured and being hurt. Just because you're hurt, that's not injured.
I loved that part of the book.
Yeah, the can you go?
Yeah.
Yeah, and my dad forbid cramps. I don't even know that you can do that.
I love that.
I didn't know
I don't
you could
believe
do
in
that.
cramps.
Yeah,
you don't believe in
cramps?
cramps?
He said he thinks cramps is weakness. He said, I think if you do what we told you to do, you shouldn't have cramps. And he said, I better not ever have any of my players laying on the field with cramps. So you know what? He didn't. Now, how he did that, I don't know. He forbid cramps so we didn't have them. And other teams would have them. He would say, that's weakness right there. So yeah, there's no excuse for that. So he taught me that I'm not bigger than the team. It doesn't matter what I did last year. You got to persevere through difficulty, and you can't worry about things that take you off the goal. I mean, that fire ant story, is a classic.
I'm not going to tell that, but you got to experience the fire ant story.
Dad did not believe in distractions. He said he didn't believe in whining and complaining, and he would just say, you can't worry about that. Anything that's happened to you, you can't worry about that. It's taking you off. Anything that's throwing you off the goal, you just have to refuse to care about it. And he did. Now, he also believed you could refuse to be sick. I don't know that medical journals would agree with that. But Dad had a toughness that was I have never seen in any human being.
What was the toughest thing for you about writing about your dad? As I read this, I thought about, God, how would I write about my dad? I mean, my dad was a big deal to me.
Oh, yeah. And I've heard stories about things that your dad did. We just talked about one this week on the show. But
how did you navigate that?
Well, first of all, it could not be written till after he had gone to heaven.
Right.
And I even had to wait. So I even did a lot of research on what people in heaven can see. I don't know what, because he would.
You didn't want him coming back.
The last thing he wanted was a book with his picture on the front of it. He did not like accolades.
Well,
he thought.
And to your credit, you only put half the picture.
Half the picture. I wouldn't put a whole picture. But he was so humble, and he thought that football, that giving out individual awards was kind of silly, because there is no sport that's quite so team focused as football. Right. You can't really get much done if you don't have everybody working together. So it was difficult to think about, but here's what kind of pushed me through it. Because my dad was not an attention seeker and he was not a career hopper, think how fortunate we were. He coached 35 years and we never left the same county we grew up in.
Yeah, it was two places. Right?
Yeah. He had some, Woodlawn and Banks when he was really, really young, but we were just, I think I was 6 when he moved to Oxford High School.
He did the high school, then he did the college.
All in the same county.
Yeah.
So
wow.
we weren't shipped all over the place. We didn't have to sell our house all the time. But on the other side, it also means that he did have a great sphere of influence, but honestly, the platform that God has given me is larger, which means there's so many people that never got to experience Dad. And I said, well, God's given me a platform that now I can take this man and share him with people who were never influenced by him.
Right.
Through a book, through an audio book, through all this stuff. And I'm getting that right now of people all over the country going, now your dad is teaching me. And that was what finally solidified it. I honestly thought that he was a very, very intriguing topic.
You know, one thing I want people to know about this book is that you've probably read books that sons wrote about fathers. You probably read books about football coaches. You may even have read a book about a football coach written by his son. I don't know. I can't think of one. But the stories in this are very different. I didn't feel like, I've heard that kind of thing before. The fire ant, the taking the ball from the official,
Yes.
the paddling story.
Yeah, that one, that was, I don't know what happened there.
Man, I'm telling you.
My stomach dropped when you brought it up.
Well, I can see why. I can see why. But these are stories. These could be in a comedy album, you know, and yet you take them and show how they apply, and you show how the scripture that applies to them.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times, how aware. I mean, I know your dad was intentional, but how aware do you think your dad was of where this was going with all because it's not just you. I mean, you're just the one that wrote the book about it. There are 1,000 guys out there that have Coach Burgess in their lives.
Yeah, and I remember one of the former players when I talked to him when he passed in 2023, because we're getting the word out to all these decades of players, all of them who revered him as a father figure more than a coach. And one of the things I kept getting back was he was hard, but he was fair. The other thing I was getting back was you didn't realize it, but his influence, before you knew it, you took on all of his attitudes. You became another version of him. And my friend, that same friend that noticed he was not running in the rain, loves him. And he says, I think the most amazing thing about your dad is he's not trying to do it. It's just like breathing to him.
Right.
It's just who he is. And so I will go through airports and I'll have my family with me sometimes, and they'll look at my ID and the young man will say, you Coach Burgess' son?
No.
Not are you Rick Burgess?
Not are you Rick?
And I'll say, yes. And he'll look and he'll go, this is grandkids? Yes. This is my wife. And a lot of times they'll get misty.
Wow.
Their eyes will water. And they'll say, I'm going to take care of y'all today, because if it wasn't for your granddaddy, if it wasn't for your father-in-law, if it wasn't for your daddy, I wouldn't be standing here right now. He saved me from, I came to his team from a gang. I didn't have a father, or I had a bad father. And I didn't think I was going anywhere. I came from poverty. And your dad taught me how to be a man. And I'm standing here working for this airline right now because of your father. And we get to hear that all over the place.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. How do you think, you can imagine a teenager reading this. Mm-hmm. How do you think your dad's lessons and his ways of doing things, because I can see my boys reading this book and loving it. Loving it.
2 spoonfuls.
Yeah. But I sometimes I think my boys, they grew up as old souls. They grew up with parents that kind of understood some stuff, and my kids actually know who the Eagles are. I know. And
that's one of my dad's favorite bands.
Really?
Oh yes.
And so how do you think a teenager today that is growing up with all the social media and digital stuff, how will this impact them?
I think it can, because I have kids that go from 35 down to 23, and then one, of course, that would be 20 if he were still with us. And it seems like you may have seen it too. There's been this shift. I think there's a generation of men that maybe this book, they'd be like, that's old and antiquated. But I think there's the next group down, the younger ones, late teens, early 20s, maybe mid 20s. They seem to say we kind of tried that and it was unsatisfying.
Right.
I think they thirst for men like this.
I think my boys do.
Yeah, and I think that they will take this and because we're losing these guys. Like a lot of things my dad did that benefited young males wouldn't be tolerated now.
Right.
You know, I remember the first time my mother, who worked in public education, she was in the office when Dad was athletic director of the same school, and she said, I knew the shift was happening. She goes, up until a certain point, the parents would come into the office and they would say, what did my kid do? And I'm here to come alongside you guys to cull this clown and get him or her back in line. She said, and then all of a sudden there was a shift. She said it happened kind of in the late 80s, early 90s, maybe 95, somewhere in there. She said the first time a parent walked in and said, what did you do to my kid? And I'm here to stand with my kid against y'all. Right. And she said, and I knew then we had lost control. She said, and she said, I put my retirement papers together.
Wow. Because
I knew it was all about to start coming apart. So put it this way, when I tell the story about us setting the woods on fire, there were other kids with us.
Yeah.
And my dad disciplined everybody.
Everybody.
And their parents called to thank him.
Sure.
And assured him if we had lit the fire behind their house, they would have done the same thing as a favor to him.
Yeah.
And he would have been grateful for it. We're living in a time now, my dad says something's mean to your sweet little boy, you know, you're calling the administration wanting him to be fired.
Yeah, I mean, I can't ever remember my parents leaving me somewhere and not saying, you know, you can spank him if you need to.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things can I tell some of you parents out there that don't believe in this, you never have to tell us that. We've watched your kids climb all over our curtains and stand on our tables, and you didn't have to tell us you don't discipline. We got it.
Yeah, we understand.
We figured that out by the behavior of your children. But what Dad,
and we know we can't spank them because we know you never did.
That's right. But I think a generation is yearning for these kind of men. I hope with themanchurch.com we could be part of that.
Yeah.
From a biblical masculinity. I'm not talking about a toxic masculinity. Like I said, I'm not talking Great Santini.
Right.
You know, where you traumatize people. I'm talking about a good, firm, authoritative leader that is also your protector. It actually put our house at peace.
Yeah.
And I think because especially discipline and leadership and a headship and authoritative figure that you fear is comforting.
Yeah.
Because you know that this person also has your back. And every player that ever played for Dad and always had that feeling that, you know, he could correct us, but nobody else could. You know, he would defend us.
One of the things I thought was interesting in this book, talking about your dad, you talked about being a little scared of him.
Mm-hmm.
And
of course.
You know, and I've always thought that was important. You know, I mean, I was scared of my dad. I mean, I'd laugh at my mama, you know, but not where my dad might hear me, or not to my dad. And I remember one time, Polly, you know, was yakking at the boys and don't do this, and I told you, and you guys better settle down. And I just heard it too much, and I just walked back to the bedroom and I went, guys. And Polly said, later, she said, what was that? I said, kind of scared of me. And that's okay.
You know? Well, think about what Scripture says, that you don't have any wisdom if you don't fear God.
Right.
Well, that means you don't fear. That's the ultimate authority. And there's a headship given to the Father. And what's sad is when that headship has no credibility. No one respects it.
Right.
No one responds to it. And we weren't afraid of him.
It's not terror.
No, well, we weren't afraid of him like he was going to hurt us.
Right.
We didn't want to be on the wrong side of his authority.
Right.
And one of the worst things you could do was disrespect his wife. That was the ultimate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, you might get in a little trouble at school and he will handle it. But what you didn't want is you've disrespected your mother and he found out about it.
Right.
And one thing that he made sure that we knew was we weren't just disrespecting our mother, we were now disrespecting his wife.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, I'd never really thought about that.
All right.
I just thought this was the mama that corrects me and gets on me if I have a bad report card. And he was like, don't ever forget she's my wife. She's not just your mother. She didn't work for y'all, you know? But that's healthy. That also taught me how to elevate and revere my wife, because he was a servant leader. He was.
Yeah.
He served the home, and he was not unreasonable. He didn't have to have his way. It was everybody's needs before his.
Yeah.
And he was a humble leader. And it was not, and I'll talk about the book. I think some people, you ought to watch people when they ask my brother and me what it was like to play for him. And we're waiting on these horror stories. Oh, what was it like for y'all to have to play high school football for your dad? It was wonderful. Again, think about how unique this is. Do you know of another man that you've ever heard of that coached his own children and didn't traumatize them?
Right,
They didn't have we never had a miserable problem because he would not bring that home.
Right.
When he came home, even if we were playing for him, as soon as he walked through that door, coach was left on the carport because we didn't have garages, we had carports.
Sure.
And he would walk into that kitchen, the half den, half kitchen, shag carpet in the den, wood paneling on the wall, dad's
avocado refrigerator.
Dad's gun rack right over the couch,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And a largemouth bass that he caught,
yeah.
And we didn't have a window in that room, so we didn't have a window unit air conditioned. Dad cut it out of the paneling and stuck it in there in a square. So, but when he would walk through there, he was dad, and my dad was fun. He had a laugh that would fill a house. He loved a good story. He loved good music. He didn't come home and say, let's get out in the yard and work on things I saw today y'all didn't do right. That never happened. And a lot of times I would be in trouble as a player and wouldn't even know it till the next day. And he would correct me then. He would not come home and correct me on football.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
I think I think coaches today may feel like they need to relate to the players in a modern way. But I think players long for the authority and the safety of a boundary. I think in our own state, we won't mention any names. I think in our own state, we saw going from an authority to a players coach this year, and saw how the players acted, and saw what happened.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's more troubled and more sad than a little boy or a male, and I would say probably to some degree even a daughter, that doesn't feel like that their father cares enough to correct them. As you said, boundaries are a blessing.
Right.
God sets boundaries.
Right.
But it's not because he's a killjoy, because they're a blessing.
Yeah.
The way God set up things, if you do it the way he said, you really avoid a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And there's a blessing in that. And I think that sometimes the saddest children out there are the ones who know deep down their parents don't love them enough to discipline them and give them boundaries. And when they come into someone who's authoritative, gives them boundaries, is willing to have their back, is willing to run through a wall for them, is there for their own good, to raise them up into something better than they are now, they thrive, and it's joyful, and they're at perfect peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we think the opposite. Laissez-faire is too much on a child. Don't put that kind of pressure on a young person.
Right.
They need guidance. They need boundaries. They need leadership.
Buddy, how can we help you?
Well, you can get the word out about themanchurch.com. That's the men's ministry thing.
We're going to put every link to you on the show notes.
Yeah, so themanchurch.com. That's everything we do for men's ministry. My wife Sherry and I do a lot of stuff for marriages, and Sherry does things for women. And you can go to burgessministries.com for all those things that we do. And then for the new show, it's Rick Burgess Show, and that is 3 S's, BURGSSSOW. So rickburgessshow.com. And of course, you can get the book at all these websites too. It's there. Or you can go to Amazon, and like you said, it's on all the audio formats and ebooks too. But you can take part in what we do for the show, take part in what we're doing for men's ministry, what we're doing for marriage, and just we'd love to have you come alongside us in all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And I would consider it a personal favor to me, whatever you can do for Rick and Sherry. So these guys are heroes of mine. Sherry's book, by the way, is Bronner, Bronner. It's a 12 out of 10. And so that's one you want to get a hold of too. But thank you, buddy, for being here.
No, thanks for having me. Always fun. And you ready to go hit the beach?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Sure. Men don't run in the rain. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Rattletrap lures for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by codedcommunication.com. Friend, have you ever faced a situation where it was forbidden to say what you wanted to say, so you had to figure out a different way of saying it? Codedcommunication.com has been involved in this struggle since before Al Gore invented the internet. For instance, Reader's Digest began accepting advertising in 1955, but it wasn't until 1979 that it began running ads for liquor. During that period of 24 years, however, the founders of codedcommunication.com were paid well to infiltrate liquor industry key phrases into the magazine. The following is a quick example of how the game was played. From 55 to 1979, there were 29 hunting or conservation articles, the subject of which was the wild turkey. In addition, there were 139 mentions of wild turkey in other articles during that 24-year period. Because of the awareness provided by Coded Communications, wild turkey bourbon surged to a market share it has yet to relinquish. CodedCommunication.com, in its newest internet form, can do the same for you today. Are you loath to just come out and tell everyone what you want for your birthday? Let us code your communication with your family and friends. For a nominal fee, we provide texts, emails, and by using AI, we will even provide a video of you in a conversation that uses your chosen keywords. For a guy, many messages can be provided with the words bass, fishing, rod, and reel scattered throughout. For a lady, the words earring, bracelets, necklace, and diamonds are easily and frequently inserted in messages. We're here to make you heard loudly, even when you choose to remain silent. We are CodedCommunications.com.